Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Housmans, and thank you for joining us here for this event with Mark Panton on his book Tottenham's Trojan Horse. My name is Well Cassim. I'm the events coordinator here, your host for this evening. In case you haven't been to Housmans before, I just want to tell you a little bit about the shop. We've been selling radical books since 1945, and we continue to host a wide-ranging calendar of events throughout the year. So I'd encourage you to sign up to our mailing list, which you can do at the back, and do pick up a leaflet which tells you about what's happening in the next few weeks until you receive your newsletter. A bit more mundane is that if we have a fire, your exit is the door you came through, really simple. And I have the unfortunate news that the toilets are located behind us here, so bear that in mind. It just remains to me to introduce Mark, who's an academic at the Sports Business Centre at Birkbeck University, and has written this wonderful book. He's going to be in discussion for about 30 minutes with our guests, and then we'll have another 30 minutes for discussion. So I would encourage you all to be thinking on your questions so we can enjoy a conversation afterward. And also there's a great cake by the counter, which I'm sure Mark will invite you to have a bit of afterwards whilst you mingle and talk with the authors more informally. Thank you. Over to you, Mark.
Cake, fire, and toilets.
Hello, hi. Great, thanks very much for joining us this evening, and thanks very much to Housmans for hosting the event. As well mentioned, the idea really is to kick things off with a bit of a conversation between myself. The book is based on sort of 4 years of research in the Tottenham area. That was one of the case studies. The other case study was in relation to regeneration in East Manchester. So thank you very much this evening for Dave Morris, who's been involved with our Tottenham network for, I think it's probably about 5 years it's been going now. I certainly went along to a meeting in April 2013, I think, and it had been going for a few months before then. Dave's been involved in various activities in the Tottenham area, and also thank you to Martin Ball for coming along. So Martin, who is also involved with our Tottenham, and I think is the chair of the Down Lane Park Friends of Down Lane Park in Tottenham. So again, involved in lots of activities in the community there. As well said, we'll probably do a conversation between ourselves for 20 to 30 minutes, but the idea really is that we try and get as many comments in or questions from the floor as possible as well. So we'll start things off now.
Maybe we should stay now.
Yeah, you want to
Stand on the stool if you wish.
Okay, so perhaps you can first of all tell us a little bit about the formation of our Tottenham and why it all started up in 2013, and perhaps any links with the stadium, Dave.
Okay, so basically after the riots in 2011, which kind of kicked off in Tottenham and spread around the country, there was a march organised by local anti-cuts campaigners and a Turkish organisation in Tottenham. We linked up with people in Hackney, and within 3 days of deciding to organise the march, we had a march of 3,000 people that marched to Tottenham Town Hall from Hackney. And one of our demands of that march, it was called Give Our Kids a Future. One of our demands was, apart from the obvious ones of trying to defend public services and facilities, particularly youth facilities and so on, one of our demands was for community-led regeneration. But other people had other ideas. I think the Mayor of London commissioned a report called It Took Another Riot, which is mentioned in the book, in which a property developer basically recommended that there be kind of overhaul of and social engineering throughout Tottenham, and to basically gentrify Tottenham and increase land prices and all that kind of stuff. So we didn't know anything about that, but we saw the council come up with a so-called plan for Tottenham. I don't know when it was, 2012 maybe, and it was a glossy pamphlet, and people look at it and say, wait a minute. And there was, Spurs were kind of like highly, promoted in this plan for Tottenham as a catalyst for Tottenham.
They hosted the launch event.
Did they host the launch event? Okay.
They hosted the launch event.
And but there was a bit of it which I said, that doesn't look right. It looks like they're going to build a walkway from White Hart Lane station, cutting through a council estate to the new Spurs ground. That can't be right. They'd have to knock down a whole estate. And people were saying, it must be a mistake, or it's just a sort of fantasy. But it soon became clear that they really meant social engineering. They'd taken this property developers report, and it's a long story. I could go into it in great detail, but once we realised the extent of the threat, actually I was involved with a group called Haringey Solidarity Group, which is a radical activist group, and we had a small discussion and said, let's do some anti-gentrification leaflets. And then I was saying, wait a minute, we need something on a much bigger scale than just a few people handing out a few leaflets. Why don't we call a meeting of people in Tottenham, groups in Tottenham? We thought we might get 10, 15 people. We got 40 people to a kind of an open meeting just to say, what should we do about all these plans that the council have, and the Spurs and other developers. And it was agreed to organise a conference, and that's where our Tottenham was launched, at this conference with about 30 or 40 different organisations participating. So I think we realised that we needed something on quite a substantial scale if we're going to challenge, effectively the government, the Mayor of London, the local council, and big property developers. So that's how it kicked off, if you like. I don't know, you weren't there that time.
I was there, actually.
You were at the conference?
Yes. You tried to make me speak.
Oh, okay.
Frankly, I resisted. I just want to say I'm glad that our Tottenham has been founded, because it's a massive enemy we're taking on. Hugely resourced people, council, Spurs, all the property developers, all of the supranational, international capitalist entities, or whatever nice way you want to describe them. And our Tottenham is not just an anti-Spurs, anti-gentrification. It's also about the very good things of Tottenham, the area, about the parks, like I'm involved in, brings together people who are providing luncheon club activity, people supporting vulnerable, elderly, people bringing together, welcoming migrant community within the Tottenham area. So when you think of our Tottenham, you might probably think of those angry voices, Dave Morris and Martin Ball, stood somewhere on a cold Tottenham street, complaining about something. But actually remember, there's a wider range of people involved in that, and that's the great strength of the organisation in survival, but in truly representing the community of Tottenham, because it is made up of many organisations across policy and other sort of issues. So it's a great thing that we have formed it.
Okay, thank you for that, Martin and Dave. Moving on from that, in terms of just not taking a negative view on things, how things are developing in the community, do you want to talk about one or two of the positive developments that you've been involved with?
Well, do you want to answer that first?
Yeah, I think I'll go first.
Yeah, go.
Because one of the good things that we did in Down Lane Park is when the council came to take the children's playground, 2 children playground area of Down Lane Park, because that's the southern bit closest to Tottenham Hale Station. You can imagine we said no, in rather stronger terms than I'm putting it now, and we went around the community collecting about 600 signatures, which is no mean feat, if you've ever actually knocked on doors and tried to get those signatures out of people, or been one of those people somebody's tried to get a signature out. So we actually put a stop there to their plans to take the park, bit a section of the park, but it was closest to Tottenham Hale, in the epicentre of their Tottenham Hale war zone, as the Director of Regeneration referred to Tottenham on the infamous bus tour for new councillors after 2014, referred to Tottenham as looking like a war zone. Well, in one extent, she was right. The council had made it a war zone. They declared war on Tottenham. They wanted demolished parts of Tottenham. And Spurs, of course, have been buying up, as the book says, through their Bahamas registered company, lots of properties along the High Road, along White Hart Lane, and lots of properties that are looking to develop now. And if you want to really go into the detail of that, there's a website called Private Eye's website, which details overseas property investments. And if you obviously just type in N17, a lot of Spurs properties will come up, land of their assembly and all the rest of it. So we've done some really good things in terms of saving the park, getting proper investments for the park. We said no on that. And other ways, we've got field interest protection for the park. That's one way in which my own organisation has fought off to protect green space, to get it protected for the future, and to get in the investment. So we've got some new playgrounds. There's no room to buy, no space, no room or money to afford these playgrounds. They wanted to build flats on it. That was the only way to cross-subsidise the protection of this park. And by the community making a stance, we actually said, no, we want to protect our park, we want this green space, not just for us, but for the thousands of people that you want to bring to the area as well, who will need green space. And we've got a proper, decent park there for them. So that is just one way. There are many other ways, but that's one example.
Yeah, in fact, we actually organised a whole range of conferences in the first couple of years of the Outside Network, community conferences, and one of them was specifically on how to have our own plans for our neighbourhoods and what we want to see protected, what we want to see improved, and we were able to draw on a whole wide range of fantastic examples. Friends of Parks groups are particularly good examples of people mobilising to protect and improve their local green spaces. Community centres, we helped to develop a community centres network to protect community centres, some of which are under threat in Tottenham. Ward's Corner, there's people that are fighting to save certain facilities, but then they come up with their own plans, and Ward's Corner Coalition at Seven Sisters have been campaigning for 10 years to protect an indoor market, a Latin American market, and a historic building, and they come up with their own community plan, which has got planning permission. They just need £50 million in order to actually buy up the site from a property developer who the council have been working with to demolish the site. So whenever the council come up with something bad, hopefully the local community can come up with something good, and there's plenty of good examples. The most recent, I think, is the Tottenham's only hospital site is St Anne's Hospital in South Tottenham, and it's quite run down, and basically the owners of the site, which is the NHS, but it's the mental health section, want to sell off 2/3 of the site for basically luxury housing. But now there's been a big effort to try and buy the site for the community, 100% affordable, genuinely affordable housing and additional facilities, community facilities and alternative health facilities and green space and so on. And actually this is getting quite a lot of publicity beyond Tottenham, because it's a very great example. We run cooperatively, and they've set up a land trust. So a land trust is when people club together and say, instead of selling that land to an individual or a speculator, sell it to the community, and it remains community controlled forever. So there's lots of positive examples, and we all know them in this room. You may have your own examples of where communities have mobilised, have their own plans, and that it's true. If you're just anti, it's kind of easy to try, for the authorities to kind of marginalise you, because they're always pretending that what they're doing is positive. Yeah. So we have to say, no, actually, it's a load of crap. But if you keep saying that, then the community kind of thinks, well, there's no alternative. So it's really important to have an alternative vision about what we want to see with our empowered communities.
Okay, thank you, Dave. So moving more particularly onto the stadium development in Tottenham. When I started my research, I couldn't see any reason why sports-led regeneration, why there was any negatives connected to it, really. And this was originally to do with the development in East Manchester, the Commonwealth Stadium as it was. And doing a little bit of research in relation to that, I realised that there were some issues the kind of local people had with that development, which had generally seemed to be quite positive for the local community, but there were still quite a lot of issues there. In relation to the Spurs stadium development, I mean, are you against the stadium development per se?
Actually, I can say I'm not. If you went to a council meeting in December 2015, you will find me triumphing on the record view that I'm glad Spurs stayed in the borough. Although the consequence of Spurs staying in the borough has been massive demolitions already, just on the site of where the new stadium is. Before recent times, there was a trading estate just up near where the Sainsbury's is, so there was lots of houses and a trading estate, several hundred businesses removed from there. So when we talk about protecting businesses at the Peacock estate and businesses, shop traders along the high road, we've already witnessed hundreds of businesses being moved down to the area. Now we can't get down to the detail of what's been happening to people on the Love Lane estate or where other people are being moved out, but certainly the impact of Spurs already. So, and I brought just on the impact of Spurs, you may have gone down the Tottenham High Road very slowly now because Spurs have been granted a whole lane to themselves because of the stadium being so close to the High Road. Over the years, this is sort of some dust stuff gathered from pavements just there outside the Spurs shop, one of the many properties they bought with a Bahamas property company. So that's the sort of dirt, and you could say it's the Tottenham High Road, it's the A10, it's going to be a bit dirty, Martin, you're quite right. And not the sort of dirt that's spread around over there. So we've got a very dirty place, a very bruised and battered community. You may have read in the pamphlets about some of the historic buildings that have been demolished, and this is a very short introduction to the 200 photographs I took of those buildings being demolished over one weekend. This is a little bit that I saved of one of the buildings. I think that's the red building, as you might guess from the fact of the colour of the brick. And this other little bit here is from, I think it was the pub, Valentino's. If you went down there for a bookie and a pint or a cocktail or something, that was part of that. There's a third building, and I haven't got a bit of that, the dispensary building, but actually, thanks to Spurs' foresight and their great concern for the heritage and future of Tottenham, they knocked down, they've saved a part of it. They've saved the front, the name. It's carefully packaged in a warehouse somewhere, waiting to come back to the Tottenham Museum. They created their own Tottenham Elgin marbles. They've saved a bit of a historic building they knocked down, and in the future you can pay good money to go and see what you could have seen on a perfectly good building at one time. So the impact of this stadium building already is destruction of historical buildings, 4 locally listed buildings. Okay, they put a lot of money into some of the Grade 2 listed buildings further up, but I think even they thought Haringey Council couldn't give them those, which they couldn't, of course. There's been demolition of an existing building site and houses. There's also the threat to all the existing houses and the noise, the dust, the pollution. So a quite serious battering that the people of Tottenham on that front line of Lincoln and Warzone are facing tonight, because, I don't know if you know, but Haringey Council, to help Spurs, in the many ways that they've helped Spurs, granted them 24-hour working. They can work on that stadium 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so that they can build their stadium in time. That's what's happened.
Yeah, a lot of local people obviously are Spurs supporters. I've been a Spurs supporter all my life. But you have to separate the team, which came from the community originally. When these kind of clubs got set up, they were clubs. I don't know if they had a membership, but they were seen as part of the community, and most of the footballers would have been from the community. So we have to separate that from the business, which is a ruthless money-making concern, making as much money out of football as they can. So I mean, a good example of this is when the Spurs were applying for permission to build a new stadium, planning permission, a lot of the local businesses that Martin referred to campaigned or lobbied or put up posters in their in their shop windows supporting Spurs because it was seen as an integral part of the community. And they little realised that that once they got planning permission, Spurs would turn on them and say, well, actually, all this area close by the stadium is going to be prime development land, and that's why we started buying up properties throughout the area. So they felt very betrayed by Spurs. We actually had a meeting with Spurs with I don't know if it's in the book.
Yeah.
Is it? Yes. Have you all got a copy of the book, by the way? Who hasn't got a copy of the book? A few people, okay.
Good
it's definitely worth
good
reading.
Danny.
It'll save having to go through all the good bits of the book, all the great bits of the book. But basically, we got written to by one of the directors of the Spurs, saying, why don't we have a meeting? Our Tottenham and Spurs have a joint meeting. So we met a couple of their board of directors in their boardroom in the ground, and we put our demands, and we basically said, you should be condemning the associated development outside of your ground. I mean, we made it clear we weren't against the actual Spurs improving their ground, but we were against the associated threats to local council estates and local business. So we asked them to condemn any threats to those, but of course they're already buying up bits of those to make money out of the land. And we also asked them to put £100 million into the local community. Arsenal had to put in £60 million, I think, originally from planning gain money. Spurs, the council and Spurs agreed £17 million. We thought that was very small amount considering this massive stadium development. And but then once they had all the permissions in place, they had this Olympic Stadium threat to the council that they were going to move to East London. Shows how committed they are to the area and to Tottenham. They used that as a bargaining point to scare the council into actually quashing that £17 million planning gain Section 106 monies that were supposed to go into the local community to compensate for this new development and increased size and all that kind of stuff. So actually all their obligations got wiped out, and they claimed that they were too poor, Tottenham, to put money into the community. They're the 13th richest club in the world as far as we understand, football club, and I've just found out today in the Evening Standard, of all places, Daniel Levy, who's does he own Spurs, or is he
chairman?
Chair, is he? At the same time they were saying they were too poor to pay that £17 million into the community, his pay from Spurs jumped from £2.84 million a year, that's pretty good going already, in 2015-16 to £6 million a year the following year. So you can see where the money is going to in the club. It's not going into the community, it's not even going into the fans' pockets. The fans are fleeced and exploited just like everybody else when it comes to business. So I think, even you have to separate the team and the enjoyment of football from the big business that's behind what's going on with these big clubs, and you even have to separate the fans and the people that come to watch the matches. In fact, we had a meeting with them as well because the chair of the supporters club had expressed concerns about the effect of the stadium development on the surrounding communities. So we had a joint meeting with them, but they were kind of they were caught in between two stools really. They had to be, they felt they had to be loyal to the club and the business whilst expressing concern about, potential damage to the local communities.
Okay, I think it was the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust he had the meeting with, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah. Supporters Trust, yes.
And they obviously they represent their members' views, I guess. Going forward, is there other ways that you could see, perhaps, certainly in terms of the council, with the new council elections coming up, and also perhaps even the football club once it gets installed in the new stadium, which may or may not be at the start of the season. More positive relations are the things that the council or the football club could do to make things work better for the community.
Well, they could stop 24-hour working, they could stop polluting the atmosphere, they could, as Dave says, actually give some money, they could stop pretending they're doing great things for the community based on all of the public subsidies they've got, they could give back the money they've had to improve the pavements they've damaged, they could return a bit of the Tottenham High Road, they could possibly invest in some conservation projects in the area, not just showcasing their own projects. They could, for heaven's forbid, they could provide some council housing. The rest of it, they could do a lot more. Now, is there any likelihood of that happening? Well, with this runaway beast having been fed all these millions of public money, having got all of these privileges, all of the planning permissions, I don't see it. I mean, there will be changes in Haringey Council. They may not amount to as much as the Evening Standard might like to scaremonger or portray as happening. The reality is, from our Tottenham and groups like that, we've got to make the best effort that we can. Long term, well, maybe the Spurs don't want to improve their relationship with the community, because long term, what is their agenda? It's to clear that community out of the way. Those houses along Park Lane, currently living in the shadow of a wall of bank of sea containers. It's like sea containers outside the front house. Somebody said, I didn't know going down Tottenham's like going down the docks of old. There's this row of sea containers supposedly protecting people from the noise that somehow doesn't go across, or the dust that doesn't come around. Now, there may be better relationships between the community and our Tottenham, and the council, sorry, in our Tottenham, because, of course, some of the people in the our Tottenham movement and campaigns have gone on to be selected as Labour. I don't make any particular political point on that, but as you well know, Haringey is a one-party Labour state, so that's essentially where all the activists come and go to. So there may be improvements in terms of that. There may be a better understanding. There might be less willingness to give in to them at any of the contributions they've got to make. There may well be some good roadback. There may be a scope to protect the Love Lane estate. Because what has happened, of course, is while the Spurs beast was unleashed upon Tottenham, Haringey invited in a new big beast, Lend-Lease, who of course wanted to do the HDV, the Haringey Development Vehicle. I won't go through that titanic battle between the community, which was a great example of how organisations can defeat large organisations. But one of the interesting things is that in Spurs buying up all of the land through their Bahamas company, keep on to register that, good use of FOI, that one there as well, is that part of the land they bought up, and where they're currently mixing cement and doing all the trucks going backwards and forwards and stuff, they now actually want to develop that themselves with their own scheme. Alas, that is within what's called the High Road West, which is Q4 Love Lane Estate. It's in that master plan. So Spurs want to go ahead and develop a plot of land, a section of the High Road West scheme, which Lend-Lease have been given permission to develop themselves. So we have, quite obviously, developers at war, where a council has made one promise to one developer, it's fed another developer, and that other developer is now thinking, actually I'm going to slice off an even bigger section of Tottenham for my profit making. So, surprise, surprise, the council are supporting Lend-Lease, well not supporting them officially of course, but objecting to the Spurs development, and of course the GLA, who of course have plenty of public money to slosh into their preferred developer schemes, are also in opposition to that. So look out for less of the community versus Spurs, and Lend-Lease versus Spurs, over development just north of White Hart Lane railway station, and it's still called White Hart Lane railway station at the moment. As you might know, as part of the great walkway scheme between Spurs on the High Road and the station, a new station is being built which may eventually be bought. The naming rights may be paid off by a well-known large property owner and sports club in the area. So you've got two developers at war, so that's the real war to look out for. There, our relationships, as I once said with Haringey Council, can't but fail to improve, given the conflict between us. And hopefully the community will get a better ally in the council than it has been so far.
Nothing further. Okay, one last sort of plug just for the book. and lots of students who I think have been involved in our Tottenham over that period of time, from UCL, Birkbeck, and other academic institutions. Has that involvement, those academic institutions, people involved, academics both and students, how's that sort of assisted the Our Tottenham network? Difficult one, maybe.
It was great when Mark took minutes of meetings, so that was really helpful. But yeah, I don't know, it's a difficult question. When we started, there was a great deal of enthusiasm, lots of groups involved, we're having big meetings, and then you kind of, after 2 or 3 years, because we're fighting such a big enemy that's, kind of trying to ignore any kind of opposition and pretend there isn't any, it gets quite a bit of a long slog. So, the meetings are not as strong as they were before, but at the same time, different campaigns and initiatives are still coming up in different parts of Tottenham, and they're linked throughout Tottenham. But one of the things that we did do is we, because of our contacts with a couple of universities, planning departments, students started to come to the meetings and offer their skills when we were kind of crafting policy challenges to the borough-wide planning, documents, and so on. So that was very helpful, because obviously academics have skills that not everybody has, and they may have time if they're on a course to contribute in that way. So that's useful, and certainly this book has been very well received in Tottenham, but obviously we need a lot more copies. We've only got 50 copies in circulation at the moment, I think, in Tottenham, but so it's definitely worth reprinting. So yeah.
Okay. Can I just say something? Absolutely. Of course, it's been hugely beneficial to have academics involved because of the wider understanding, the greater knowledge, the wider knowledge, the connections with sports-led development schemes in America, community campaigning elsewhere across the world. So it's actually vital, particularly as the council, of course, reels out its experts all the time, and in the local planning thing, I have no idea about planning regulations and stuff. But if somebody tells me, I can certainly go off on a good show as to pretend I know about it. So it has been enormously beneficial in that respect. One other key thing, which I will plug as well, has been actually we've educated ourselves. We've upskilled ourselves in terms of our campaigning tactics, in our knowledge. We've shown a willingness, possibly a willingness people would say was rather strange, to go through these thousands of pages of council reports, looking for the detail, looking on obscure websites, properties being bought in Bahamas, using freedom of information requests, challenging the council in other sort of ways, and actually ensuring that all the bits of information we've got out to journalists, to academics, people that can carry our message from the small business corner of North Tottenham that we're in, actually out to a wider audience. And events like tonight, with other people from around London, from other sectors, not obsessed about Tottenham. I mean, I'm doubly obsessed here because I'm not sure if Mark knows, the area in Manchester where the new stadium was built, I used to play on as a kid before I got socially cleansed out of Manchester. So
they're following you around.
They're following me around. I'm obviously the bad side. That's when I arrived. But it has been great to not like Dave says. And Dave says, I'm not moving me, bring the tank. And I said, bring the tank for me as well. Make that 2 tanks if you want to shift as well. Because we're determined to stay in our community. And that's why we taught ourselves and other people have all of the things that enable us to try to take on an organisation that's resourced by our money, the council, that actually supposedly acts in our name and yet rarely does. And with the involvement of academics, of students with their enthusiasm, fresh eyes and from new perspectives, and actually ourselves looking to use all of the things like become quite good at media interviews, doing public meetings, doing deputations, and the practice we've had of putting out a protest outside Haringey Council, and we must be the textbook case study.
Okay, thank you very much. So enough conversation between ourselves. Any questions on some fairly sort of perhaps some provocative things? Gentleman at the front here, yes.
I'd like to ask a question about
I live in Tottenham at Northumberland Park, so I can see the work going on in Tottenham. In fact, walking along Tottenham High Road is a shock to me. I can't believe that something like that could be built. Which over just, I can't even describe it. You'd have to go there and see it, and you'd be shocked. What I'd like to know is those 3 buildings, listed buildings in Tottenham High Road. My understanding was, so the word on the street, if you like, was that they were knocked down illegally by the developers. They were listed buildings, the ones you held those bricks up to. And they were knocked down over one weekend.
Yeah. I'm not going to throw them.
They were knocked down over one weekend without legal.
No, I don't think that's. They did give themselves. The council gave them permission when they applied for the new stadium. They were originally saved in the first proposal, and then by the time it came round to the second one, they claimed something called a pinch point. I won't bore you with the technicalities of this, but for nearly 100 years, thousands of fans have been actually managing to get to the ground without being run over on the Tottenham High Road. Suddenly, the width of the pavement actually became a massive issue. I many times marched up and down there myself. I couldn't quite work out. Obviously, I was only one, not hundreds of thousands, but I don't see the reason for that pinpoint. Just need to correct you though. It was 3 buildings they knocked down. Yeah. You've got to remember they knocked down Fletcher House, the 4th one, the year previously, which was just up near Archway. Archway's a different story altogether.
Because I have a factory there in Tottenham, and we're under threat all the time. And the council are acting legally. Because I think the council are cold and beaten. Because they act illegally.
The thing is, they're very clever in acting very legally within their own laws most of the time. That's why you've had to go to the lens, certainly on the HDV and other policies of actually seeking judicial reviews. I think when the story of Tottenham becomes involved, actually it won't just be the number of protests that they do, the number of call-ins of policies by backbench and opposition spokespeople, but it'd be the number of legal challenges as well too. It's all legal. It's all in your name.
Yeah. Perhaps if you don't necessarily have to give your name, but if you've got any affiliation, that might be helpful to
Well, yeah, I mean, my interest, obviously, for the moment is to do with Professor Mark here, is academic. I don't want to start a club conflict, but I'd like to bring up the case of Arsenal and the Emirates. I mean, obviously there's no walkway, but they got away with it there. That was definitely sports-led, a la Americana. And I was a mature student in the Metropolitan University on Holloway Road. And you could see it must have been the same 24 hours as that man said there. You could see it going up and up, just, come around, if you missed 2 days in the college, it was... And so I'd like to know, from the professor's point of view, was any study done on that? Because it's obviously very relevant, not being far away.
So the question on the Arsenal development, the person who supervised my thesis, my PhD, is a chap called Dr. Jeff Walters, and he did, if you wait until the end, I can try and look at some sort of reference for you, and he did his thesis on the development of the Arsenal Stadium. They, being in Islington, and Islington perhaps being a bit wiser to the value of property in that borough, they have, as far as my understanding goes, they did pay a Section 106 contribution, something up to 60 million. It may not have reached that amount, and a lot of that was to do away with the recycling plant, I think, which was nearby to the stadium, and to remove that and to reposition it elsewhere. And they didn't end up doing anything to Holloway Road Station, which was part of the original plans, I think, which was to relieve the congestion which is caused in that area. And will obviously is still a major issue, is going to be a major issue for Tottenham, for the football club. Anybody who goes to games there, Tottenham supporters will know that, with the capacity of as it is at the moment, something like 41,000, it's very difficult to get people in and out of the area. and although there's talk of revamped train services, it's the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. But certainly there are other studies on Arsenal.
Can I just say something? Yeah. Actually, I used to work. Where they've got the stadium. I used to work in the post office, the sorting office there, Queensland Road. And that was demolished to build the new stadium, I think. For 6 years, I worked as a postman in Islington, so I know the area quite well. But I want to say that. I think lots of these major developments, sports-led developments, have the same problems, but also it's not just sports-led development. Developers are getting increasingly confident that they can build bigger and bigger developments. That they're less and less about what the community needs, and they're about luxury, housing, corporate malls. And anything that can make maximum profits. So, and it's happening all over London. It's not just massive development, but there's lots of smaller ones that are just the same problems. They're not developing London in a way that is for the benefit of the people that live here. So we have to get organised in every community, in every borough in London, to assert our rights. We have to have strong residents groups and campaign groups and networks, and there is actually a London-wide network called Just Space, and they have regular conferences. They have different kind of campaign groups and residents groups from all over London attending. So we're trying to build up a London-wide kind of movement of opposition to this kind of top-down obnoxious development, of which Spurs is just a particularly bad example.
I just live on the other side of Haringey. I mean, perhaps you might give some indication of how we might vote, but that's a side question. I don't know with the comparison, from your experience with both Arsenal and Spurs, that you couldn't make some sort of comparison, and my limited knowledge would put Arsenal way ahead of Spurs historically, and Spurs' dissociation from the community is accept as a sort of send the supporters along and let them spend the money. But I mean, you may know that more. Okay, so that's on history, and I think that sort of comparison would be a good thing to do, and maybe come out with a lack of trust in the first place in Spurs to do anything that might be that useful. The second minor thing is you were talking about sort of money making or something, I wonder whether the sports clubs at present are not there just to make a big loss, which they will leave on. Some people will make a lot of money, like say Manchester United owners will make a lot of money. The owners at West Ham will probably make a lot of money, and we will leave the clubs themselves with a hell of a lot of debt. So it's just a bit careful about, let's hope that Spurs makes money, because that needs a little bit more investigation as to who is going to make the money doing what. Yeah? Anyway, sorry about those 3 points.
Maybe sort of trying to summarise those. I think most clubs, in terms of the money coming into football now, I think that over the last few years there's been so much money coming in from TV revenue that what we saw previously was a lot of clubs, quite a few clubs going out of business and overreaching themselves. Certainly in the Premier League now, a lot of clubs are declaring profits, and it's just how much profit. Yeah, then you need to look at the books to see where that's going. Obviously Daniel Levy last year awarded himself a considerable increase. He's now paying himself £6 million a year. I'm sure he's worth that. And other CEOs at other football clubs are doing something similar. In terms of their contribution to the community, a lot of football clubs are basically, unfortunately, in my view, perhaps outsourced their corporate social responsibility, in that they have charitable foundations which themselves rely on government money or local authority money to fund what they do. That's not to say they don't do good work going into, council estates and other difficult areas. But they use that in their planning requests and say, look, we don't really need to put more money in. We're already putting 4 million into the community through our local foundation, through our foundation. And so they use it, strategically.
Is that Tottenham or Arsenal?
I think both those clubs would have similar sort of figures that their foundations do. Slightly different structures, because actually Arsenal's is the own. I think Arsenal and Aston Villa, the two clubs which haven't organised separate charitable foundations. They're still part of the club, although they do rely on, when they're talking about the amount of money, which is the equivalent money, it is also coming in from government schemes, and the Premier League, their Kicks Foundation, they're taking part in that.
Do you want to say something about grassroots football? And how much they're struggling, people that play in local parks and all those clubs, and the money's all going to the top.
Yeah, there is, overall in the Premier League, obviously, there's, as everybody knows, a lot of money coming in, but still, grassroots football, park pitches, we know it from our kids and games being cancelled recently, because of a lack of investment in football pitches at a lower level. So you see a lot of money coming into the Premier League at the highest level, and again, the idea of it trickling down, trickle down economics, it doesn't trickle down very far. It's people at the bottom who are paying, trickle up economics.
Can I just come in on something? Yeah. John? I'm not going to say who to vote for, even though I didn't make a reference to the one-party state apparently. But what you should do, is ask the candidates, will in the future they be honest about their hospitality? Will they declare all of the hospitality, not what's above £25 or £50? Or will they refuse to go on developer-sponsored jollies to the south of France, to the MIPIM conference? Because that has been one of the little side stories of the developers taking over Tottenham, is the number of councillors who have had trips to the Spurs, no offence Dave, to the Spurs boardroom, probably for a better lunch than maybe you got.
We didn't get any lunch.
Even if you got any. These people have certainly had lunch. Claire Coburn had a gift of a child's sports trip. Alan Strickland, the member for Regeneration, Housing and something else, regulation, of course. What did he get? He got a trip to see NFL, Gridiron, American football at Wembley, because of course it was important for him to be able to tell us via Twitter just how fantastic it would be when American football comes to White Hart Lane. And of course both Coburn, Strickland and a number of other people had taken money from developers, including Spurs sponsorship money, to go to MIPIM, the south of France in Cannes, for the MIPIM Developers Conference. So one of the key things is ask them, will you please show some integrity if elected? And if you are going to meet with developers, why does it have to involve lunch? Why does it have to involve dinner? Why can't it just involve water, like we've got at the front here? And that's the key thing about the new style, hopefully, of Harrogate politics, is that people will have hopefully learnt the lesson of what has happened to the people before them, but obviously show some greater integrity and not pretend, as they said to me when I challenged them on taking money from people like Spurs to go to the south of France and then actually giving planning permissions and giving large amounts of public money to them to repair the roads that they damaged and the rest of it. And they said, oh Martin, he said, this is where I need clever people like Mark to be involved. Help me explain this. He said, the difference is, let me get it right, we go to MIPIM as the landowning authority. When we sit down here in Harrogate, discuss planning matters, we're the planning authority. And that's a big difference, I thought. I really do need somebody clever to explain that too.
Gentlemen,
I'm a Spurs fan. I've been going since October 1969, and have I missed many games since then? Very few. I think the new ground is brilliant. It's brilliant for the club, it's brilliant for the area, and I'm really excited to be going next season. And it propelled Tottenham even further into competing in the Champions League and being the winning club I want to support. So perhaps I'm at the wrong meeting. I bought your book anyway because I'm interested in points of view. Of course, councils are incompetent, corrupt and useless, but as far as Tottenham ground is concerned, I think it's a great thing for the club, for the area, and I hope it's going to be a great success. Thanks. Okay.
Thanks very much for coming along. We have tried to engage with a few Spurs supporters and even offered to attend at a sports trust meeting. But I was told that, that which I understand, maybe there's other things that people have got on their mind, such as securing seats in the new stadium and things. But it's good to have somebody like yourself along here.
I would imagine the trust would be very happy to chat to you because Martin Close, who's the chairman, is a friend of mine, has maybe left-wing views of Italy and is sympathetic, I'm sure, to your viewpoints.
Yeah, I have spoken directly with Martin. I think it's probably just it's relatively low down the agenda, I think.
No, we had a joint meeting with the Supporters Trust in the sports centre opposite the football ground. And it was a good constructive meeting. I think they had 3 or 4 of the Sports Trust and 3 or 4 of us from out Tottenham. But they're in a, as I said before, difficult position because they're trying to get more influence with the Spurs hierarchy, who had to some extent frozen them out, but seem to have cozied up to them a bit more recently. And I think the fact that we exist and we've had a meeting with the Sports Trust, the Spurs obviously realised, we ought to be actually in better relations with our own Supporters Trust, or they're going to turn on us. So, but yeah, obviously supporters are just ordinary people like us, and anything we can do to work with, the supporters of Tottenham, wherever they're from, because also they're going to have their own issues wherever they live. Not so many people probably from Tottenham can afford to buy tickets anymore at the ground, but wherever people live, there's going to be similar issues of having to defend our public facilities, our green spaces, stand up for our communities, and so on. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I actually live near Arsenal, and I don't want to take any sort of football fancy type position on it, but I know because the residents of the area around Arsenal were actually very upset with Arsenal because they broke many of their planning promises about underground parking that replaced the Holloway. And I don't think Tottenham have done that yet. Perhaps they will in the future. But I think if you talk to the residents around Arsenal, they may regard the stadium as a good thing overall, but they certainly feel let down by the club, I think.
Any more questions?
Yeah, sorry, can I come back to something?
No, this lady hasn't asked mine.
I'm a having gay activist against the HGV. Have been directly involved with Tottenham. That's very interesting. I wanted to ask one question is about whether the walkway is still going to happen. I'm not clear whether that's been. And also I forgot it went out in my head and went out the other end. The national organisation. I was only thinking yesterday. I've been watching a film on social housing, social cleansing on the BBC, which I recorded. I watched that yesterday, and very, very good film. And the thing that crossed my mind really was this is going on all over the country. Big business is very, very powerful. And what we desperately really need is that we know what's going on elsewhere, and that people can, if needed, we can go and support other people, and they support us, and so on. I mean, that we really need to all know what's going on, so that big business can't do Trojan horses without people knowing. People will know in future. So that's the other thing. I think that's really important.
John said a bit on the walkway. I assume the walkway is happening because the very latest Haringey press release like a super picture of this super walkway with the new facilities in it, including a public square. I think that was the only thing Dave and I got excited about, was it created a place where we'd probably gather for dissent. New public square like Spurs. But it certainly will happen. You remember, of course, there's already a walkway between White Hart Lane Station and the highway. It's called White Hart Lane, but there's also a Whitehall Street as well. So there's a number of routes through. What, of course, I think the idea of the walkway is, you go straight from the new station, which is further south than the existing one, with a new glass frontage all along there, currently being built, and then you'll be able to sweep straight down past the climbing frames, having gathered for some pre-match entertainment maybe in the square, and all of the chains along the side and all the rest of it, no doubt banners across and all the rest of it. So there's still that existing sort of plan, and I can tell you is only last week, Lend-Lease, who are the preferred developer on the redevelopment of the Love Lane estate, codenamed High Road West scheme. I've been out there leafleting, telling people that they're the people that are going to be deciding their destinies, and already talking about various master planning consultation events, all sorts of activities building up toward a planning application some point later in the year. The book has the details that all of that area is under a demolition notice, under a 7-year demolition notice, so the people do know, the shops are aware in that sort of sense. But Lend-Lease, in their greater ambition, of course, didn't just deliver their leaflet, we're coming to tell you about how wonderful we're going to make your houses and this new walkway. They decided to deliver it to the other side of the new stadium, on the Northumberland Park estate, which of course is where they were reviewed in terms of getting their development vehicle sort of permission sort of right. So you can certainly see they've got ambitions not just to have a walkway from Spurs Stadium to White Hart Lane, whatever that's called when it's actually built, but also the other way, down from the stadium towards Northumberland Park. So as far as they're concerned, yes, it is one of the many things that they try to tell you is going to be brilliant about the new landscape. And I mean, the facilities at the ground are obviously going to be first class, there's no doubt about that, and there's going to be some fantastic entertainment. And for those of us living in it, we might have to experience this every day a year entertainment aspect in terms of stuff. But there's certainly walkway, I think, that is the sort of thing they want. They want to create that shopping centre, really. Like a 1960s shopping mall precinct, as far as I'm concerned, but it's one of their ambitions.
Okay, yeah, one last.
There were very happy days at Spurs when at the 517 club, whenever Spurs lost, they came and drunk themselves senseless out of sheer merriment for the power of the opposition. I just wonder but Spurs management replied to that by putting up the prices. I wonder with the success of Spurs at the moment, they're actually putting down the prices.
No. I think the new season ticket prices, there are complaints from existing season ticket holders
I used
about
to joke that it was
the cost of the new season tickets. So
I used to joke that it was cheaper to go and watch the Cameroons than it was to go to Spurs.
Okay, on that, we'll probably close it. Okay, thanks very much to Dave and Martin for their time. There's lots of cake at the back, which we don't want to take home, so please do help yourself to cake. And if you haven't had it, if you haven't got a book, please buy one on the way out. Thank you.
On the way to the